Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Japan and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good number of different styles, and if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're one of the most established names when it comes to Japanese craft beer. They're very diverse and do lots of different styles. They've remained consistently good over the years, and they're definitely one of the breweries that I would recommend you check out if you're interested in the Japanese craft beer scene. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one that I've been meaning to review from them for quite a while. It's a style that we have had from them before, but if memory serves me correctly, we haven't had a beer in this particular sub-style actually. And this is also one of the first examples of a Japanese brewed version of this particular sub-style, if memory serves me correctly. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to stick to Japan like I said. We are going to go to the northern part of Honshu, which is known as Tohoku. We're going to Nagano Prefecture, which is supposed to be very, very pretty, and to be specific, we are going to the city of Yamanouchi, which happens to be home to a company called Tamamura Honten, who release their beers under the name Shiga Kogen beer. So this particular beer is called 1T IPA. It comes in at 9.5% ABV, and this one is a West Coast triple IPA. Like I said earlier, if I'm not mistaken, this is one of the first Japanese examples of this style. So yeah, this is a beer I've wanted to try for quite a wee while, and thankfully I managed to get a hold of it this time. This is yet another beer that I picked up at liquor shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Yamaichi here in Osaka. A lovely little beer shop run by Koji and his daughter Rika, based in his grandfather's old soy sauce factory from what I understand. Always got a great selection of Japanese stuff there, along with some nice American things and old school European beers as well. So yeah, definitely worth checking out if you find yourself here in Osaka. I'll put the link to their Facebook page in the video description below as usual. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. Definitely cool to be reviewing one of the first examples of a Japanese triple IPA. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen beer. There will no doubt be more added to that list in the near future though. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese playlist along with many other things, and there are other playlists that you can check out there as well if you're interested. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about the Tamamura Honten company and the Shiga Kogen beer brand. So, Tamamura Honten, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture in the Tohoku region on the northern part of Honshu, one of the main Japanese islands, the biggest one of course, the main central one, and this area is found a few hundred kilometres to the northwest of Tokyo, and is particularly well known for its ski slopes and its hot springs. So the Tamamura Honten company can be traced back to 1805 when they started brewing sake, and they began brewing beer under the name Shiga Kogen beer, which translates into English as like Shiga Heights or Shiga Mountain beer, and this started in 1998. But they also produce wine and a few other things too. So the head brewer is Sato Eigo, who joined the company in 2003, and the idea to brew beer came when the numbers of skiers visiting the resort began to dwindle, and so in May of 2004 they applied for their brewing license and they received it about 4 months later. So they bought their brewing equipment and trained for a week at a brewery down in Kyushu, the southernmost of the main Japanese islands, before they began their own commercial activities. And when they started brewing for themselves, they only had a consultant for help. So it was a little bit of a baptism of fire for these guys, but needless to say, they came out on top and have gone on to do very, very well. But Tamamura Honten produced their own hops, sake rice, barley, buckwheat and blueberries, amongst other things, and they actually have their own hop variety that they developed called Shinzu Wazi, which is a hybrid between Czech Sats and a local variety. They originally used it as a bittering hop for lagers, but now they use it as an aroma hop, and it's used in a good number of their beers from what I understand, but I would love for them to do a single hop Shinzo Wazi beer. So we need to keep an eye out and see if that's something they do in the future. But these days, the brewery also owns 2 tasting rooms, which are known as Tepper rooms. There's one at the brewery and one at the Shiga Kogen Ichinose Hotel's Chalet Shiga. So that's something we definitely need to go and check out at some stage. And the bottle label art on these is very distinctive. It's designed by Tanaka Noriyuki, and he's been with them for a good few years from what I understand as well. As of April 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 115 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and like I say, there's a variety of different styles in there. One of the beers I really would recommend that you try though is the Sonoju, which I believe was their 10th anniversary IPA. That was one of the first, I think that might well have been the first beer that I ever tried from Shiga Kogen beer, if I'm not mistaken, and that was a way back in like 2015 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, definitely worth checking out a few beers from these guys should you get the chance. But yeah, we can leave it at that for the history part of this video. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and actually have a little look at this beer. So I'll let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. So you can see there it has the typical Tamamura Honten artwork. I'm not sure how well that's going to show up because of the light. Let me just turn off the laptop screen, maybe that makes it a bit better. It does, as you can see. But yeah, looks very, very nice. You can see 1T IPA. This type of artwork is kind of typical of what you'll see for the Shiga Kogen beers, as I've mentioned before. But there you can see Tamamura Honten on the bottle cap. I'm not sure how well the camera is going to zoom into that, but yeah, we'll see. We're just having to make do at the moment while I'm in Japan. But as we said earlier, this one is a 9.5% West Coast Triple IPA. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So, if memory serves me correctly, I think I paid about 850 or 900 Japanese yen for this beer. So that translates to roughly it's 900 yen. I think it's going to translate to about maybe 7 euros, something like that, 70 Swedish kroner, and that means somewhere in the region of like $8 American, £6.50, £6-ish sterling, something like that. So yeah, that gives you a rough idea of the price of the beer. As I've said on many occasions, Japanese craft beer is a little bit more expensive because they have to import pretty much all of the malt as well as the hops. So craft beer has always been a little bit more expensive in Japan, and especially so when you consider that wages are a little bit lower here because, you know, Japan's economy has been stagnant since the bubble burst in 1993, but still a very good standard of living here, you have to say that. So yeah, anyway, so as you can see with this beer, it's poured very nicely. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but there are a few good little bits of sediment floating around in this one. I've maybe had the fridge at too low a temperature for this beer, because I know that this one is pretty fresh actually. Either that or I've shaken it up and the little bit of sediment that's there has just been stirred up a wee bit. But yeah, this beer, Koji did receive this beer maybe about 2-3 weeks ago, something like that. So yeah, this beer has been in the fridge for a good little while, which explains the little sediment particles. But you could see that when we poured this beer, it poured with about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would have said cream coloured head. We'll see if we can sugar it up and get a wee bit of that back. And there you are, you can see we've managed to get a little bit of it back there. I would say it is more kind of cream in colour than being perfect white, maybe a little bit of an ivory tinge to it actually, but that is fading away to be a thin foamy layer very fast, but the ring around the edge is remaining. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head as well, but overall it does look pretty damn nice. So yeah, nothing particularly surprising about the appearance of this beer when you consider what style it is. A lovely, kind of richer, more amber colour. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a couple of things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts that you put into the beer will also affect the colour of the beer too. But whenever it comes to IPAs, you don't often have to care about those latter two variables that I mentioned. But yeah, in terms of the West Coast IPA spectrum, this one really leans a bit more toward the amber side of things, which means it's going to be probably a little bit sweeter, a little bit of caramel or some kind of American Turo in there, I would guess. But yeah, for me there are two different kinds of West Coast IPAs, the ones that are a bit more oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, or the lighter, more bready and biscuity ones, such as Pliny the Elder from Russian River Brewing. Those are two of the pinnacle examples of this style for me. But yeah, it looks like a nice beer. As I say, a bit surprised to see so much kind of sediment in this one. But yeah, that's just how it goes sometimes. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one and see what it's all about. Nothing else we really need to say about the appearance of this beer. Oh yeah, aroma-wise I have to say, this one comes across as pretty old school actually. I really don't know, I've seen this beer on Koji's page quite a few times. This is one that they produced a good few years ago. It didn't say in the little blurb on the website when exactly they started producing this one, but yeah, this one has been on the go for a good little while. But yeah, very old school smelling West Coast triple IPA, this one. I wish there was more of these beers about actually. But yeah, for me it gives you everything you would want from the style. You've got a good little bit of that kind of piney, resiny dankness in there, a big green component, oily, fruity characters, and then you've also got that big malty sweetness in the backbone too. So yeah, the way this beer goes together I think is very, very nice. The aroma gets a thumbs up from me. But let's break it down and just describe it for you that wee bit more in depth before we actually taste the thing. So, aroma-wise, the backbone of the beer for me is like a kind of fresh, brown bready bread crust. That's really standing out with the beer for me. So, pardon me, good little bit of kind of fresh, brown bready bread crust in there. On top of that, you can smell there is a little tiny touch of woodiness to this beer for me, and maybe a little hint of cracker. But overall, I would say that it has a very kind of wholemeal, brown bready type character to this one, which I do enjoy. So yeah, the way that this beer does that is really nice. It smells like a bit like American malt, to be honest with you, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a bit of German malt in here as well. It tends to be one of the two when it comes to Japanese beers. They're not producing so much of their own malt here yet, but maybe that'll change as time goes on. But yeah, for me, lovely little bit of sweeter, kind of brown bready character in there. Definitely a bit of straight up caramel, which you would expect from a triple IPA, to be honest with you. You do need a little bit of sweetness in these beers to balance them out, especially when it's a more dank West Coast example of the style. But yeah, sweet caramel for sure, a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit as well. And yeah, it goes together very nicely in that sense. Wee bit of white bread underneath, good little bit of sweeter brown bread. To me it smells like American Turo that's been used in this one. It smells like it's based on the kind of more old school West Coast Californian IPAs. But yeah, malty side of this beer is very, very nice. On the hoppy side of things then, it's kind of what you would expect actually, and there's something very familiar about this. I wouldn't be surprised if this beer is something along the lines of like Citra and Amarillo, or Citra Simcoe Amarillo, something like that. It feels quite old school, and I do remember that this beer was produced, I think this one was produced back in like 2017, 2018 or something like that for the first time. So I don't think they would change. I think they would just produce a new beer rather than kind of playing around with the hops and things in this one. They wouldn't release it under the same name because it just, Japan just doesn't tend to do that, to be honest with you. But yeah, there's something quite old school about the hoppy nature of this beer. But yeah, there's a little tiny touch of earthiness in there for me. There's a little bit of pine resin as well. Good kind of bright floral aromaticity, I would say. But also a little bit more oily. And again, you expect that when it's a triple IPA. Good little bit of grassy ester in there as well, quite bright. So yeah, the way this beer goes about its business is very, very nice. It gets a thumbs up from me on that side as well. I do like to have a big green component when it comes to these beers. But yeah, I think there's been a good little bit of early edition hopping used in this one. So as I've told you in many videos before, when it comes to IPAs, there are 3 different kinds of hoppings that you can use. Early edition hopping, which, assuming you have a 90-minute wort boil, takes place within the first hour of the wort boil. It gives you mainly bitterness, it's basic chemistry. Heat for a longer period of time allows you to extract more chemicals from the hops, therefore you get a nice big kind of dank flavour and aroma out of the beers. But then you've got late edition hopping, which is within the last half hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly flavour aroma, but a little bit of bitterness. And that translates to a kind of brighter green component in the aroma, whereas you've got dry hopping as well, which comes after the wort boil is complete, and that gives you mainly flavour and aroma rather than anything else. So West Coast IPAs tend to use all 3 types of hopping. The more modern New England hazies tend to use the latter 2, and there are modern takes on the West Coast IPA that you only really use the latter 2 as well. But bitterness, generally speaking, bitterness has dropped in IPAs over the years as New Englands have come to the fore. But yeah, for me, the green component in this one definitely smells more old school, and there's a good little bit of early edition hopping going on in here. But like I said earlier, you've got a big oily fruity component to this beer, which I think goes together really nicely. Yeah, there's a little touch of grapefruit coming out of it, but not overly much. I'm actually getting more of an oily, sort of passion fruity character out of this one, and there are wee hints of like more oily and juicy mango in there, little bits of apricot and pineapple as well. So yeah, I get a feeling that this might be a little bit of Citra and a wee bit of Simcoe, to be honest with you. I think there's a combination of the 2 of them here. I think the Simcoe's giving you the more oily passion fruit, but it's not madly pungent, I would say. But then the Citra's giving you the more complex kind of mango-y, pineapple-y, apricot-y notes. But I do get a significant amount of orange from this one as well, which I think is likely to come from Mosaic. But I will say that the aroma in this beer is not overly pungent. It's actually quite laid back, to be honest with you. This is not the most madly it's not the most madly pungent of beers, I have to say. So yeah, I like the way this one goes about its business in terms of its aroma. Actually, properly old school West Coast triple IPA thing. One other thing I would say about this is that at 9.5%, it's actually on the lower side of things for a triple IPA for me. I would always say that triple IPAs are the ones that are above 10%. A double IPA for me is between 8 to 10, and then a triple is like 10 to 12, and then quadruples above that. But that's just me. You guys can leave your thoughts on that in the comments section below if you want. But yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about the aroma. As I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy it, but I think we should taste this one now. So this one is the 1T IPA from Tamamura Honten's Shiga Kogen beer brand, a 9.5% West Coast triple IPA. One of the first examples of a Japanese brewed West Coast triple IPA, if I'm not mistaken. But let's get stuck in and see what this beer is all about. Slàinte, skål, cheers, kanpai. Oh yeah. I will say, this is quite an interesting one. You can taste straight away with this beer, despite the sediment, it is actually in pretty good condition, I have to say. It must have just been the fridge was set too cold or something like that. But yeah, it must have just been that. I think I'll need to check the temperature of the fridge so that I don't mess up the other beers. But yeah, what I'll say about this beer is it gives you everything you'd expect. This has got a big, bitter slap to it, which I've missed, to be honest with you. I always complain about that with West Coast IPAs these days. A lot of them kind of lack the big, bitter green component that you expect of the West Coast sub-style. But yeah, this beer gives you everything you want. You've got a big, oily, sweet, malty base to it, big, oily, and slightly juicy fruits in there, and the big kind of punch in the face from the green component. So yeah, thumbs up to Shiga Kogen beer once again. This is pretty damn good, I have to say. It's a big boozy beast though. It certainly doesn't hold back in that sense. It lets you know, yeah, this is a triple IPA, and you want that, to be honest with you, from a West Coaster. So yeah, for me, this one is very nice. I mean, I like, I love beers that have a little bit, I love West Coast IPAs that have a bit of sweetness to them, and a little bit more oily orange character. So this one delivers on both of those. So yeah, it is right up my alley, I have to say. But let's break the flavour down and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So for me, the middle third of the palate in this beer, you can feel that the backbone is a lovely kind of fresh, white bready bread crust. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a kind of woody character coming out of it as well. And then there's some Jacob's cream cracker just above there as well. So yeah, for me, the bready character on this one, I'm pretty sure this is American malts that are in this, but there could just be a wee hint of German in there too. But above the kind of crackery layer, I think there is a kind of slightly sweet wholemeal brown bready character in there. It does give you a wee bit more graininess the further into the aftertaste you go. But yeah, it certainly has a wee bit of that kind of brown bready character. Above that though, you can feel there is a layer of kind of smoother white bread. And I also quite like how that goes together too. So yeah, bread crust, a little bit of cracker, a little bit of woodiness, wholemeal brown bread in there, white bread, and then it goes together in there. It's pretty nice. So above all of that, you have a little bit of a more kind of sweet side of the beer, but like I say, it has the sweeter side of this one has a wee bit of dryness to it, which is kind of interesting. So the brown sugars in this beer come out in layers. In the centre of your palate, you've got a little circle there, and you can feel that really dense, sweet, oily, caramelly character coming out of it. So yeah, quite dense caramelly note to this one. Then as you move further out from that, you can feel there's a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, and it just feels to me that there's a little touch of a kind of more toasted caramelly character sitting on top of that. So if you go from the other side, you've got the white bread, the toasty kind of caramelly layer, and then the McVitie's digestive biscuity notes, and the more dense sweet caramelly note in the dead centre of the palate. So yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice. So yeah, for me, this beer, it really gives you, the malty side of this one really gives you everything you would want from the West Coast IPA. It could potentially just be a little touch sweeter, but you have to remember this beer is a little bit more old school, and it's also, one of the first takes on this style in Japan. In fairness though, when I think about it, one of the beers that would have been around roughly around the same time as this would be the WIPA from Mino Beer, which is like it's got a bit more wheat in it than this one, of course, hence the name WIPA. But yeah, that's a big 9%er that's kind of similar in profile to this one. The Japanese do like a little bit of sweetness in their IPAs for sure. So yeah, the WIPA from Mino Beer, I reviewed that years ago. That's worth checking out as well. And like I say, they list that as a double IPA, but this one they listed it, Shiga Kogen beer listed as a triple, so be aware of that. But that's the malty side of this beer is quite similar to that, I would say. But I think we've covered everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate in this particular beer. So let's have a wee look at the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. And it's a mix of white bread and brown bread, and it gets drier the further into the aftertaste you go. But the base of that back third of your palate is a little bit more. It has got a little bit more kind of fresh, kind of brown bready character to it. Above that, you've got a more the bread crusty character is just that little bit drier. As I've always said, more bitter and more dry flavours come out further back on the palate, the sweeter flavours come out further forward. So the way that goes together, I think, is really quite nice. You can feel the kind of more dry and almost like the toasty bread crusty base. There's a little bit of the cracker there, and then you've got the brown bready note, which for me is a bit lighter and a bit more airy, and then above that you've got a lighter, more airy white bready character coming out of the beer as well. And then above everything else, you can feel there's a little bit of a more dense white bready note just at the top, and then you start to get the yeasty esters above that. Let's just have a wee look at what the yeasty side of the beer's given us in this one. So, for me, the yeasty side of this beer, it has a little bit of a kind of woody, farmhousey, brown bready character to it, I would say. So the way that that goes together is also quite nice. And I do like, you get the yeasty side of this beer a little bit more into the aftertaste, and the sweetness kind of lingers there as well. Yeah, I'd say that this beer gets a bit sweeter, but also a bit more yeasty the further you go into the aftertaste. But definitely, the flavour on the back third of your palate is taller, and then as you come into the middle third of the palate, it condenses down and squashes together a little bit more. But yeah, I think that covers what we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of things. But this beer certainly lets you know it is a little bit more boozy. So, hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, you have got a little touch of earthiness there, but it's almost as soon as you move forward from that, you get quite a lot of piney resin in the backbone, but then you also get a little bit more kind of floral aromaticity as you move further forward. I would not be surprised if this beer is using Columbus as one of its bittering hops. Columbus was always known for giving that big kind of spicy, floral aromatic sort of thing. Maybe a little bit of Chinook, but my head is telling me Columbus in this one. This could be a little bit of a more old school sea hop beer, in fairness. The more that I think about this one and kind of analyse the flavour, it could be an old school sea hop beer. But yeah, certainly as you move further forward, you can feel a bit of that more dank, piney resin underneath on the sides of the palate, and then you've got the more spicy, floral aromatic side of things coming out of it as well. So yeah, it's quite nice. Round the front curve of the palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of oily, grassy sort of thing to it, and yeah, that works very well too. So, on the fruity side of things then, I think we can look at the front third of the palate now. The border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. It's a kind of, I would say that it has a little bit of a mix of white and brown bread, and the base of that front third of your palate has a little bit of a kind of more smooth white bready character, a little bit more of a white bready bread crust, then some white and brown bread mixtures on top of that. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at the fruity side of things then. This beer does make me wonder if there's a little bit of Chinook in it as well. The Chinook would explain the kind of pine resiny characters that this beer has, and they linger into the aftertaste. But at the back, the reason I say this is that at the back of that front third of your palate, you have a little bit of a kind of quite pungent grapefruit. And as you move further forward, it mellows out and gives you a little bit more of a pungent passion fruit. The passion fruit mellows out to be a little bit sweeter going forward, but then yeah, you've got this big oily sort of mangoey type thing. And as you move into the very centre of that front third of your palate, it's a little bit of a more kind of dry apricot underneath and oily pineapple on top. So yeah, I think that's a combination of Simcoe and Citra in this one. But if I was betting on this one, I think there's Columbus and Chinook in here for the bittering hops, and then the hops that are added in a little bit later are more likely to be a little bit like Citra and Simcoe. And as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate with this beer, there's a little bit of an orangey character, but it's the more that I drink of this beer, the less orangey I feel this one is. Yeah, I mean, for me there is a little bit of a kind of oily orange in there, so there could be a wee bit of Amarillo, but it feels a bit lighter. It could be Mosaic, but Mosaic I don't think was that popular at the time that this beer was released. I could be wrong, I could be mixing up the years, but yeah, for me, as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of an almost gooseberry lychee type thing, which I suspect is from Citra. I do suspect there's a wee bit of that in here, but then yeah, there is a wee bit of an orangey character, but the thing that really lingers in this beer for me overall is the big piney resin note, stronger kind of grapefruity quality, a few of the other lighter tropical fruits as well, but then you've got that big boozy kind of caramelly and biscuity type note out of this beer as well. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. A lovely kind of West Coast triple IPA, and properly old school. I think this is an old school sea hop triple IPA, which would make sense if I'm remembering my kind of timelines correctly. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour of this one. Really solid beer, this, properly old school, a nice kind of little bit of nostalgia for me as I review this one. But on the mouthfeel side of things then, to round off, this beer, it's kind of top end to mid-bodied, bottom end of, top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. It's kind of sitting around there. The carbonation is very, very smooth. The beer has a little bit of an oily mouthfeel, which suits the style. It has a little bit of the cleanliness, which you would kind of expect because of the water in Nagano Prefecture. It's very mountainous up there, so you would expect that. In terms of IBUs, this beer has got to be about 80 or 90, something like that, potentially even a little bit more. Heavy on the IBUs, this one, which you would expect from an old school West Coast triple. The malt base, like we said, has a wee bit of dryness to it, a bit of smoothness, and a good little bit of oily sweetness. Then the big oily fruity characters are in there as well. But yeah, I like this one. Grapefruit lingering, big piney resins, good little bit of sweetness. Everything you would want from an old school West Coast IPA, regardless of whether it's single, double or triple or whatever. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. This one has been the 1T IPA from Shiga Kogen beer by Tamamura Honten in Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture in Tohoku in Japan. Lovely beer, this one, and I'm glad that I finally got to get a review of this one done. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Shiga Kogen beer, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the fairly near future. I do have one more bottle to have a look at from their sour beer range, and you'll see that before I finish up my time here in Japan for this trip. So yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and try some Japanese craft beers. In particular, have a look at some of the Shiga Kogen beers from Tamamura Honten. Sonoju is a very good place to start, but anything you get from these guys is going to be pretty damn good. Until the next time, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, and I'll see you guys in the next review.